Oh my goodness. All right. So NXT from June the 23rd, 2026. Pretty brutal episode of NXT. Man, I knew it was going to be filler from, last week, but I didn't expect it to be so bad that the NXT main event scene actually carried the show. You know how strong that main event scene had to be to make this show worth watching? It was pretty strong because usually that's the weakest part of the show. But in any event, we're just going to do a Great American Bash run through, and then I'll kind of skip along NXT. And there is something I want to discuss, which is the continuity errors that they have going on here. Like NXT didn't spend a whole lot of time on the continuity problem that they have. And the continuity problem, what I mean by that is that there's people being pulled from NXT, namely Carmen Petrovich and Bronco Nima, who are both popping up in AAA, doing a completely different gimmick in a completely different stable, and they're doing different things in NXT. Like, that's the problem. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but for now, let's just run through Great American Bash, and then as the match was built up on NXT, I'll just talk about the match, the build, etc. So let's start with match number 1. Tristan Angels versus Shiloh Hill. So this match, of course, comes from the Mr. NXT thing and the issues that come before that. So Tristan Angels wrestled Aaron Rourke on this match for the for the Evolve Men's Championship. And because Shiloh Hill was playing with the lights and making weird sounds, and he had pulled Tristan Angels under the ring and completely distracted him, Aaron Rourke ended up winning. This Aaron Rourke is terrible. This is also the second time they've had Tristan Angels put this guy over. He put him over on Evolve a couple weeks ago. I actually forgot that Evolve is about to have their own little premium live event called Succession 3. I completely forgot about that because I was kind of perturbed that Tristan Angels didn't win this match. And I'm like, why would you book him to lose, especially going into Great American Bash? Like, you could have got him disqualified or something. But I see why they did that, because they probably wanted Aaron Rourke to, for starters, win his debut. This was his debut on NXT. His actual in-ring debut. And I think that I forgot that he's going to defend the title against somebody else at that Evolve show. So despite the fact that I greatly dislike this Aaron Rourke, who is incredibly flamboyant and doesn't have if you're going to be a character like, the Aaron Rourke type of character, you need to mix it up. You need to be like a Goldust, where you're kind of vicious too. Kind of like Adrian Street a little bit. But if you're not going to be that, you're just going to be like whatever Aaron Rourke is. I don't know if I need some layers to that. I just don't think you can just be some kind of flamboyant weirdo. I don't think I like that too much. So there's that. I think Tristan Angels wins this match. Let's move on to Saquon Sugars versus Dion Lennox. So they had a promo segment on the show where they got to arguing about what's going on here. And there was parts of this that I actually did like. There was parts I didn't like. Let's talk about the parts that I did like. I like that Saquon Sugars always wanted to fight this guy one-on-one, which is why he took his time and took out the rest of the guys that was in Dark State. So he said that Dion Lennox wanted to be the leader of Dark State and was getting opportunities that Sugar felt like he should have gotten himself. But the part that I didn't like is that he said how much he loves Dark State. I was like, ugh, that sucks. That's no good. I didn't want to hear about how much he loves these guys. I didn't want to hear that. Dion Lennox, of course, claimed that he was given these opportunities because he was a superstar, and that's how things should be. And that they got what they needed from Saquon Sugars, which is basically experience. And now they don't need him anymore. And they're going to finish the job on Sunday. Then he said that Saquon Sugars is fake that in reality he's insecure and he was always anxious and nervous, and the team could never rely on him. He says in reality they were spending a whole lot of time babysitting him. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I wish they would have taken some time to tell us more about how, ineffectual Saquon Sugars was. Please cut the balls off of your baby face more. It's not quite AEW level yet. It's fine. For Sugars and Dion Lennox to be cutting their first promos against each other, it's fine. I definitely think Sugar should win, so I'm going to go with him to win. I wouldn't be mad if Dion Lennox won. I just wouldn't understand why Dion Lennox would win. Next, Miles Bourne versus Tavion Heights for the North American Championship. They also had a vignette because neither one of them appeared in the building. And basically they talked about their friendship, and Miles Bourne was not going to sit around and wait for, opportunities. He was going to make things happen for himself. And he gives Tavion credit for, being by his side during those times in the NQCC. But he also feels that Tavion doesn't want him to do too good and felt like he was leaving Tavion behind. Tavion Heights talked about being a loner, finding a team in the NQCC, and being brothers with Miles Bourne. And he's not going to be allowed, or he's not going to allow, rather, him to be kicked aside. That Miles Bourne didn't get here by himself, and that he's going to show why he deserves to be there as well. It's an interesting story. I wish they'd have turned heel. And maybe, well, I'm talking about Tavion Heights. And maybe he will turn heel. Maybe he'll turn heel in this match, which I think it's time that the Miles Bourne experiment ends. I know some people are going to say, look, Tavion Heights ain't much better. But I think that there's a lot more there for me, anyway, with Tavion Heights than there is with Miles Bourne. I don't dislike Miles Bourne. I just think that he's bland as fuck, and we got enough bland people running around. You know what I mean? And plus, he's been champion for a little while now. I don't know what else you do if you haven't beat Tavion Heights. I could see the belt going to maybe like a Jackson Drake or something like that, but I don't know. I mean, I kind of get it though. I'm going to go with Tavion Heights winning, personally. But I wouldn't be too upset if Miles Bourne won. I just think that it's time, and it's weird that they talking about the No Quarter Combat crew, and Charlie Dempsey left that group and had not mentioned it, thought about it, talked about it. Had nothing to do with this. Has nothing to do with these guys. Has nothing to do with anything. He's gone and doing something completely different. Ren Sinclair also left this group. Has been doing something completely different. Hasn't been in the middle of this, nowhere to be found in this, and they were all in the same stable. You would think that would be part of the storyline if it's about, the brotherhood and the connectedness of the No Quarter Cash crew, but it's basically just about these two guys being former tag team partners. They just happen to be called the NQCC, which, weird, but okay. Moving on, Zarya versus Tatum Paxley. So Zarya says that Tatum Paxley don't know how to move on, that they both were at one point in the shadows of another, and she said that Tatum Paxley embarrassed her, cost her her first match as champion, so she's going to give her her rematch so that she can feel some pain, because she believes that Tatum Paxley is addicted to pain. All right, so there was some conversation about Tatum Paxley perhaps being called up soon. I don't think that's a good idea. It just doesn't feel like a good idea. But I think Zarya wins this match. I don't see them hot potatoing the title back to Tatum Paxley. If Paxley was to win the title back, that would be deeply damaging to Zarya as a character. I mean, she finally did fulfill her destiny in winning a title, only to lose the only matches that she's had with the belt. Probably not a good idea. So I'm going to go with Zarya and think it's a pretty slam and dunk case there with Zarya winning this match. Okay, so Ren Sinclair versus Ariana Grace for the Speed Women's Championship. So they had the Speed Tournament final, which was Izzy Dane versus Ariana Grace. This was fine until the finish, which was quite frankly the dumbest fucking finish I've seen in ages. Of all the dumb finishes I've seen, nothing made a wrestler look worse than this. Shawn Spears is outside the ring asking for pretty much a high five or a dap or something like that from Izzy Dane. It's completely and totally random. Like, it's like he's off asking for like a hot tag or something outside the ring. And I'm like, what is going on here? And the time, of course, the speed matches are timed. So the time is ticking down and Izzy Dane is about to do like her running kick finish or something like that. And she allows herself to go over and dap Shawn Spears. And then when she turns around, Ariana Grace rolls her up in a small package. Man, I was about ready to throw my tablet. I was pissed. I hate that finish. It was so stupid. And it seemed like out of character for everybody involved. It was out of character for Izzy to allow herself to be distracted that way. It was out of character for Shawn Spears to be acting all giddy and weird. Like he can't wait a few more seconds for her to win. It was stupid. It was really, really fucking stupid. It was a stupid fucking finish. And it was heel versus heel, so the crowd wasn't really into the match. So that was already a problem. That was a continuing problem. So Shawn Spears cost her the match, so she was pouty. Immediately afterwards, Spears and Vance wrestled Hank and Tank. This was a match that I would rather have done anything. I would rather have my teeth pulled than watch this. I refuse to give a fuck about Shawn Spears. And next thing I know, the match was over, but it went on longer than it should have, if we're being honest. And then afterwards, Nico Vance attacked Shawn Spears and chokeslammed him through the announce desk. So they kicked Shawn Spears out of his own group. And you know what? Good. Fantastic. It's great. Nico Vance is a guy who's been getting pushed in the Booker T promotion. He's a champion down there. At least he was last time I watched. Which was like a month ago. I haven't been following it that closely. I mean, all of wrestling has kind of been dragging me down, so I'm kind of behind on everything, except WWE and AEW. I have to catch up with various shows like MLW and TNA because I sometimes forget they even come on, so I have to go back and watch them. So I'm not sure. When you're watching something like reality of wrestling, I don't know if I could dedicate any more time to watching wrestling at this point. All of it is kind of dragging me across broken glass at this point. So last time I checked, he was a champion down there. I saw his matches. It was okay. He's slowly but steadily improving. I know that was the whole reason they put Shawn Spears with him, so that he could improve. But I don't think Shawn Spears added anything to Izzy Dane. I mean, they did kind of give her a character that she could work with, and I don't think she needs the training wheels of Shawn Spears anymore. And they've been teasing this for a while. They've been ready to kick Shawn Spears out of the group for like a month. So they finally bit. Hopefully this doesn't lead to a feud. Hopefully this just leads to Shawn Spears going away for a really long time and we never see him again. And maybe they could throw his body over the bridge like they did with Two Dimes, a murder. So, but anyway, Ariana Grace versus Ren Sinclair for the Speed Championship. I don't see any reason why Ariana Grace will win this match. So I'm going to go with Ren Sinclair. They have been doing a decent job of building up Ren Sinclair. And, Ariana, I like her. She's very charismatic. And they don't utilize her charisma. That's the one thing that I really have been frustrated with when it comes to Birthright. Besides the fact that they suck. And they actually lost again. See, I did all that talking. And it was Birthright that lost to Hank and Tank. What am I talking about? It was Dorian Von Dukes and Sean Legacy that beat the Culling. I had to look at my notes. See, that just goes to show that I don't watch. I wasn't paying attention to this shit at all, bruh. I'm not going back to edit it out either. I don't give a shit. I don't care. So now we got it right. It was actually Birthright who lost to Hank and Tank. And it was Dorian Von Dukes and Sean Legacy who beat the Culling. This stuff doesn't matter anyway. You know, these are filler ass matches. Hank and Tank matches never matter, and Birthright matches don't matter, and Culling matches don't matter. So none of this stuff really. Don't. If you want to hold it against me that I got it wrong, who cares? Just let's laugh at it in the comments. I don't give a shit. Anyway, the Birthright lost again, and they didn't just lose. They got a fool made of them by some gay C-level comedian. It wouldn't be fair to even call him a C-level comedian because I've never heard of him outside of NXT. So he's probably like a G-level comedian who Pillman was holding the guy and Dempsey went to punch him and he somehow escaped and Dempsey punched Pillman. And I'm just like, what the fuck is this? Like, this Birthright thing was dead in the water the moment that Finley's brother decided to go to AEW rather than NXT. This thing was dead in the goddamn water. I'm sick of it already. They should break it up, crumble it, just, rip it up, write it on a sheet of paper, rip it up, and throw it away. This thing ain't working. It's not going to work. If they somehow turn this into a stable that Ariana Grace can lead, where she can do promos and character work, then it could probably turn it around. But if this is going to be a vehicle for people to take Pillman seriously, I forget what his fucking wrestling name is. Lexis King. If this is going to be for him, this ain't going to work. Because Dempsey, this is the third or fourth stable that Dempsey has been in, and it ain't none of it clicked. Ain't none of it clicked. I know he was in a team or a stable with Timothy Thatcher. That didn't work. Then it was No Quarter Cash Crew, which I believe is a spinoff of his Timothy Thatcher thing. That didn't work. That Connors kid, Finley's other son, he was in Chase U. That didn't work. This was ridiculous. No, Chase U itself was great, but Chase U 2.0, which was what Uriah Connors was in, sucked. And Lexis King was floundering on his own. So you basically just took all of these people who couldn't get over and were floundering, and you threw them together. And now they're floundering times 5. It's the worst thing. It's terrible. It's a terrible idea. It's one of the Shawn Michaels' big misses. And, Finley and Regal are not nearly involved as much as they should be. I know that Lexis King, I believe, is a speed champion. I think he still is. So maybe they'll put both speed titles in this group. And I don't think that's a good idea. Ren Sinclair probably wouldn't lose a lot if she lost this title because the title is just kind of like a lightweight TV belt anyway. But Ariana Grace needs to be cutting promos. She needs to be showing some personality. She don't need to be going in there wrestling 5 3-minute matches or nothing like that. So I'm going to go with Ren Sinclair wins. And yeah, I botched this review. Who gives a shit? Let's just move on. We're going to move on expeditiously, like they say. So next, Kendall Gray versus Lola Vice for the women's championship in NXT. They had a contract signing because there's a lot of contracts to be signed on this show. A whole lot of contracts. Lola Vice says that when she got started in NXT, she came in straight from mixed martial arts and she realized she had a whole lot to learn and she had to start from scratch. And she also had the hype and she had to get humbled here in NXT. And this is the same situation with Kendall Gray. Kendall Gray has all this hype and she's a crossover athlete, but she's not ready yet. She's not ready. You're not ready yet. Kendall Gray says that she's come to NXT to raise the bar. She put over Lola Vice as being a great MMA fighter and a great crossover athlete. They gave a nod to Shayna Baszler, who was also, of course, a quote-unquote crossover athlete, which is basically they're just saying that she's a shoot fighter, even though, because both of these girls are shooters too, with Kendall Gray being a wrestler and Lola Vice being an MMA fighter. And so I thought the promo was pretty solid, They didn't make a whole lot out of, Kendall Gray hitting Lola Vice with the belt, even by accident last week. Because they're both baby faces, they kind of chalked it up as a misunderstanding, even though Lola Vice took it personally, but she didn't harp on it, which is what you would think should happen if somebody hit you in the head with a goddamn platinum belt. The crazy thing is people keep calling it gold. Like, let's put some gold on the line. Ain't no gold nowhere near that goddamn belt. That belt is gray. All right, I'm pushing it, calling it platinum. It's actually more like nickel. Anyway, this ought to be a great match, and it ought to be really fun. And I'm thinking Kendall Gray is going to win because NXT they've been slow rolling this Kendall Gray thing for a while. You know, they've been trying to not make it too obvious that this is the direction that they're going in with Kendall Gray because of all of the positive attention and positive press she's been getting. But ultimately, that is the direction that they're going in, is Kendall Gray. And look, Lola Vice has got to be, she's been in NXT 2-3 years now. So I think she's got enough equity in order to put over somebody else. So I'm not sure it's going to be a dominant win. If they're booked that correctly, they could book it a lot like, you know, a Benoit and Eddie match or something like that. Even though I don't think either one of them, you know, certainly Lola Vice doesn't have that level of skill. But, you know, something where Kendall Gray gets a quick roll up or hits a big finish and wins the match, but it's not dominant, so that Lola Vice can run it back, because I think Lola has beaten her once already, so that you could have, I think, the third match. And maybe you do something very special there. You go Iron Man or Underground or something like that. So I'm going to go with Kendall Gray wins, because and I'm very interested in what's going to happen if Kendall Gray loses. You know, that's one thing. That's kind of crazy, because I am in that boat where I do like chaos. And I do kind of wonder how Dave Meltzer and Brian Alvarez are going to act if Kendall Gray loses. I'm very interested in what will happen if she loses. All right, so we got a main event here: Tony D'Angelo versus Naraku for the NXT Championship. If you haven't noticed, this show has 7 matches on it. Night of Champions has 5. This one has 7. So they're giving you a full show here. So they started this show with Naraku coming to the arena with the contract signed for the NXT Championship. He hand delivers the contract to Tony D'Angelo. Robert Stone wants him to hand the contract to him, but he insisted on giving it to Tony D'Angelo. He gives it to Tony D'Angelo. The damn thing explodes in Tony D'Angelo's face with flash paper. He laughs at him. I popped at this. I like this. I know a lot of people really don't like, you know, when the contracts light on fire, because they did it with Keith Lee and Karrion Kross, and people kind of made fun of it. I like it, you know. I know people prefer like the old school way of using flash paper, like, you know, Undertaker and Paul Bearer, which was a great angle, by the way, when they set Undertaker on fire, him and Mankind. You know, the old Jerry Lawler flash paper. You know, I like it this way. I like the creative way of doing it. I didn't mind it when the cameraman blew up in front of Hulk Hogan. I just think the execution sucked, but it's not necessarily a terrible idea. So they went through this whole thing as if Tony D'Angelo was a gray area for the night. So it was like, well, is he even going to be able to perform? Because he got flash bombed earlier in the night, which is a great question. Is he going to be able to have this match? What's the extent of his injuries, etc.? They put him in the ambulance. He's gone from the arena. Robert Stone's got the championship. You know, he's holding it close to his chest. He's fending off all of these guys all night. People are just disrespecting the hell out of Robert Stone. Jackson Drake storms in his office and demands matches for the Great American Bash. You know, Keanu Carver is yelling at him. Naraku laughed at him and said, "Oh, yeah, you want to suspend me? Go ahead. But if you do that, there's not going to be a championship match for Great American Bash." So he laughed at him. So they decided at the end of the night to make a decision about whether Tony D'Angelo could wrestle. At this point, Naraku comes out and he wants the title to be handed over to him by forfeit. At this point, Mason Rook, he comes out and says he's willing to fill in for Tony D'Angelo since this should be his match anyway. At this point, Jackson Drake shows up, reminds all of us, really, that the Vanity Project are the tag team champions and are not booked for the Great American Bash. And I was like, oh shit, you make a good point, sir. You make a solid point. So he wants to be in the match as well. And at this point, I'm scratching down, please, no triple threat matches, please. So as Mason Rook, who got called pork chop by Jackson Drake, by the way, and I did laugh, so I called him a pork chop a couple weeks ago. They decided to fight. And so Mason Rook attacked the Vanity Project, and as he was beating them up, Robert Stone announced that Tony D'Angelo absolutely will be defending the title this Sunday. He comes out with his face all bandaged up. He looks like Kano from Mortal Kombat with his face all bandaged. He tries to spinebuster Naraku, and he gets poked in his bad eye, and then Naraku flees. I like this. I thought this was great. Even the Mason Rook parts I thought was pretty good. It was a good red herring to lead people to believe that Tony D'Angelo was not going to be able to wrestle. So I liked all of this. This was all very interesting. It was all very good. Even though we ended up going back to 0 at the end of it, we do have a substantial status change. Now, the Tony D'Angelo is not going into his championship match 100%. Like, it's the same match, sure, but now there's different stakes. The stakes have been elevated for Tony D'Angelo because now it's not just he has a bad feeling about Naraku. Now Naraku has literally done something to him, and he has to get revenge. So I'm definitely going with Naraku to win, simply because they did the burn spot for a reason. It was an excuse. It was a way out, and it's the best way out they probably could find. So I'm going with Naraku. They're probably going to write Tony D'Angelo off TV. I would not be upset if they had like another person come in and they had Tony D'Angelo almost win, even with the burnt face, and then Hiromu or somebody like that came out to help Naraku win. I wouldn't be mad about that either. That would be really booking Tony D'Angelo strong. Might be too strong if we're being honest. Like, you already burned the guy, now you need a second person too. Like, what next? You need a fucking tank? You're gonna need to run him over with an 18-wheeler? Anyway, very solid looking card. Has some good mid-card stuff there. There's a little bit of filler, with the Saquon Sugars and Deion Lennox, as well as the Shiloh Hill Tristan Angel stuff. So there's some filler there. But overall, it ought to be a pretty good night of wrestling. I expect the women's championship match to really cook. And that ought to be the best match on the show, if we're being honest, because everything else seems to have at least a B-side that's not so great. And that's unfortunate, but it's true. It's very, very true. All right, let's talk about what's going on in NXT. So they had a scene on NXT where Carmen Petrovich and Nikita Lyons were mocking Jada Parker after she lost to Natalya. There's also some scene of Natalya, I think, getting trophies or something. I don't know what she was doing. I wasn't paying attention. Anyway, OTM walked over to Jada Parker to see if she was okay. She didn't even have the fight in her to argue with Nikita and Carmen, but she walked off from them. But in this segment, it was noted that Nikita saw Carmen Petrovich on AAA, and Lucien Price asked Bronco Nima what was up with him being in AAA. Now, for those of you who don't know, maybe you haven't been following, AAA debuted a new Perros del Mal, which is a classic AAA stable from, I think, the early 2000s. Like, I'm familiar with Perros del Mal when Taya and Penta was in it. And so I don't know the entire history of the stable and all that. But this has been something they have been teasing for Umberto and Angel, who are two of the principal members, as well as Daga. They brought Daga in for this too. But they've been teasing this for like 3 years when it comes to Umberto and Angel. They literally started teasing the Perros del Mal thing in NXT. It had to be 2023. It was a while back. Before they formed Legado del Fantasma, they was teasing return of Pedro Stamal. Now, apparently, the family of the original leader owned the rights to the gimmick, and they recently just got the ability to use the gimmick, so now they're rebooting it. But it's a big deal in Mexico. They're feuding with Kaiser Americano, so it's a big deal. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, like, okay, how are they going to translate that to NXT? And they seemingly just aren't, because Lucien Price seems like he's still going to be tag teaming with Bronco Nima as part of OTM and NXT. So is he going to be doing two separate things? And again, that goes back to what I was saying before about the Nico Vance thing and him being in Reality of Wrestling, because he was doing something different in Reality of Wrestling than he's been doing in NXT. And it's like, what's up with the continuity? Like, okay, something like that. That's still the WWE system, because Booker T's promotion is grandfathered into the WWE programs. But AAA is literally a WWE program. Why is he doing anything different than what he's doing in NXT and AAA and vice versa? I don't know. I also don't know why he was the guy picked to be in it. I guess they need another big guy. But he seemed like a very random choice to be put in the group. And I think he speaks Spanish, because Carmen Petrovic also speaks Spanish. So maybe that's why they were picked to be in this group. But there's a whole lot of excitement around them. And I don't like the idea of, and this is what I've had a problem with the Americano stuff, is when people are sharing these characters and the characters are being presented and pushed very differently on both shows. They're being pushed as main event talents in AAA, right? This is a top feud with the top guy, top babyface in the company. And they're still basically nobodies on NXT. I don't like that. I don't like it. I think that that's a bad idea. Now, they did mention that there will be some AAA wrestlers coming to NXT, which I got down. I didn't get down on my knees literally, because I'm not that kind of fella. But I was like, praise God, because I've been calling for this for like a month and a half for them to use some luchadors from AAA. And so maybe they will bring in, the Perros del Mal and fill out how they're going to operate the NXT AAA crossover thing. But I could also tell it's probably going to be like Mr. Iguana and La Parca and those kinds of guys, maybe Laredo Kid, to do some stuff. They said these guys are going to appear at Great American Bash, so I don't know what that means, but we'll see. And I was very excited about that, because NXT definitely needs more male talent. They need male talent very, very bad. All right, so let's hit a couple of more things and then get out of here. Keanu Carver lost to EK Prosper. I was like, oh boy, we're really down in the dumps at this point. But Keanu Carver killed him after the match, because people kept slamming folks through desks all night. So EK Prosper ended up winning with a sunset flip, which was a counter to a powerbomb. I couldn't believe that they decided to do that, but they did. The match was fine. EK Prosper showed a little bit of heart and some fire while fighting back, but I don't understand why they cut the legs from underneath Keanu Carver like this. Maybe they just don't want to push him to the main event so soon, and that's kind of what they were building to, where if he had won, then he was going to start asking for title shots and stuff. But that's why you disqualify people. Like, there's a bunch of different ways to get around if you have a monster guy that you're pushing and you don't want to push him too fast. Feeding him losses is not pinfall losses is the dumbest thing you could do. Get him disqualified. Have him hit a guy with a chair, or get counted out or something like that. It's protect him. But then again, Keanu Carver, I don't think he's the kind of guy to take care of that a whole lot about. But I like him, and I was suggesting that they just kind of look out for him. All right. So NXT was super fillery. It wasn't very good. But Great American Bash ought to be pretty good. This was one of those times where I wish the event was 2 parts. And they would have give us a little bit here and then the rest on Sunday. But I don't understand why they keep changing the gimmick that way, where sometimes it's 2 weeks, sometimes it's one. I don't know. It's weird because I believe they did a premium live event earlier this year. What was it? Gold Rush, I think it was. That was 2 weeks. So why not have 2 parts to a lot of your premium live events? I'm not saying it should be 2 weeks, but maybe do like a I want to say like a pre-show, like a day one kind of thing, and then a day two part. Like you do day one on Tuesday and day two on Sunday or something like that. It would have been nice. So the only thing else for us to discuss here. All right, we got to make another edit because I was looking up this quote from Dave Meltzer about NXT running the same day as AEW again. And I saw that Natalya was given another Guinness Book of World Records for most female submissions or something like that. So I think that's what they were talking about on NXT that I wasn't paying attention to because there was Natalya involved. And like there's a trigger in my brain where if Natalya is there, I stop paying attention. So that's what was going on. This was really a shoddy piece of work from me, but I'm putting it out anyway because, hey, there were times where I put in maximum effort and nobody gave a fuck. So I'm putting in sloppy work this time. It's like when you're in college, when you make sure you put your punctuation everywhere and then the motherfucker don't even notice. And then you're like, hey, you know what? My good grammar, good diction, good word choice, none of that stuff matters. I'm going to turn in some slop at the last minute. How about that? All right, so this is what Meltzer said about the triple show on Sunday, because it's not just NXT. TNA is running that same night. So it's going to be TNA, NXT, and AEW all going on the same night. If I remember correctly, NXT will be at 7, and I think that's also when AEW starts, but TNA is going to be running earlier in the night. So it's going to be like, I think 3 or 4 or something like that. I'll probably have to check that after this. But this is what Meltzer said. If I'm WWE and I'm doing my first non-Tuesday night big time show on the CW, I want to go in there with my best foot forward. I wouldn't want to go head to head with the AEW show, especially with the type of pay-per-views AEW has put on lately. So obviously this is Meltzer gassing up AEW again. I looked at the attendance for Forbidden Door. I'm going to save that for the review, but it was not looking good. It was less than 10,000 people. He refuses to admit that AEW is not in a hot period. He refuses to admit that. He thinks that the shows are as great as ever. And even the hottest AEW fans say there's really only 2 matches on the show that they really want to see. And there's like 9 or 10 or 11 matches or whatever booked. So you're in a long night of mediocrity, especially for people like me. But here's my issue. This is not the Monday Night Wars. People can have one thing on their tablet and another thing on their TV. Most people can watch both. If you're a super fan for one and you're not a fan at all of the other, you're probably going to watch one and not the other. But most people who do reviews or they tweet about wrestling live, they're going to watch both. Or they're going to follow one and then watch it the next morning or later that night or something like that. This is not a competition. And then also NXT can't lose. Like the reason they're being picked to be put on the CW is because there's nothing else that the CW can put on at that time that would get the ratings that NXT gets. So even if they can't get maximum ratings because there's a comparable pay-per-view going on, it's still better than whatever else they would put in that time slot. So NXT can't lose one way or the other. Even if they did, I don't know, something crazy like 400,000 viewers, right? As long as the sponsorships and all that stuff is coming in, NXT is going to be gravy. And they're clearly going to do better than that because their ratings have been comparable to AEW's slight upswing in ratings. So NXT is going to be fine. The issue here, and I think this is the real issue, is that Meltzer is concerned that NXT will damage AEW's pay-per-view numbers. He shouldn't, because NXT's card is weak. But then again, so is the AEW Forbidden Door number card. It's weak and it costs you 50 fucking bucks. This is not, and it never has been, WWF versus WCW, where people have like 1 or 2 TVs in the house, and maybe they had more TVs, but not all these TVs had cable, and they have to make a choice about which wrestling show to watch and which one to not watch. That's not this kind of situation. People can watch these shows simultaneously, and sometimes people do. This ain't the first time these companies have run head to head. It's not, especially when it comes to pay-per-views. It's not the first time, and it likely won't be the last time. I think, if you are scheduling a pay-per-view, I don't know why TNA decided they were going to schedule a pay-per-view on the same day that AEW would. Like TNA, I understand saying, look, you need to pull out because they're running a literal pay-per-view, and Slammiversary is one of their big events. I think it's their second biggest event outside of Bound for Glory. So it's like their version of SummerSlam, and they're going to absolutely get crushed by Forbidden Door, running the same day. So that's going to be deeply problematic. But that's TNA, and that's TNA's problem. That's not NXT's problem, because NXT is in a win-win situation. Just getting the money to run the show is great. But then no matter what they get, it's almost as if, unless it's absolute dog shit in the ratings, CW can do worse. So I don't think it's a big problem from CW's perspective or from NXT's perspective. I think he's mostly concerned, he being Meltzer, that TNA and NXT might somehow, and this is a legitimate concern because I was thinking about this, it might tire people out because there's a whole lot of wrestling that day, and I'm looking at it from the perspective of how are we going to recover? Because all of this is on a Sunday. If this was like 3 shows on a Saturday afternoon, then maybe, you got Sunday to recover. But you're saying I have to watch TNA, NXT, and AEW. And looking at AEW's card, that card was like 9 matches or something like that. It's going to end at midnight, at 1 a.m. And then all of us who do reviews are going to be up till like 1 or 2 o'clock doing reviews for the shows. Bro, it's a work night for most of us. Like, unless you do this stuff professionally, it's a work night. Who the fuck wants to be watching a cage match at 11:45 at night? Especially when you've watched other cage matches that weekend and you've had just a bunch of other matches going on earlier in the day, and simultaneously it's a whole lot of wrestling to watch. It's a very, very crowded weekend. So that's an issue, but it's mostly an issue if you're TNA, because they're the ones who need money and need exposure. But who knows? They may end up putting on the best show because the expectations are so low. But Meltzer is obviously just trying to keep up the tribalism, and I don't think it matters at this point. We've done this whole them going head to head thing. We've done this numerous times already, and it really hasn't hurt anybody. And people just do the numbers they were going to do anyway. Apparently, it doesn't affect AEW because Meltzer never says that NXT has affected AEW or that WWE being on has affected AEW. He has never admitted that, and it probably never would. So ultimately, it don't mean a fucking thing because WWE's money is guaranteed. So whether it's 100,000 people watching it or 1 million people watching it, they get paid the same thing. So it don't matter. Let me know what you guys think, though, about this whole shabazzle. I'll talk to you guys later, man. You guys be blessed. Peace out.